Welcome to Journey On. We are here once again. We've made it. We're past the merger. We're through. Everything was successful. I haven't seen any divorce papers, so I'm assuming our family is still together.
As far as I know.
Absolutely. It's been great. I thought that was an interesting message that you had coming into the celebration of the merger of Bismarck and Fargo. And you talked about if there's a problem, we keep it in the family, right? So we're not going to have to all meet in Jamestown at the courthouse to celebrate to satisfy our issues. We can deal with it ourselves.
Yeah.
So how are you doing? How are things in the world of Journey Fellowship?
Things are great. We have it's a little busy for me. This we were kind of talking before we started recording. There's a few things going on that's all behind the scenes, but it's getting taken care of. It's the taking care of it that sometimes takes a little time, and then you also want to take time for everything else. And this week's message, I want to spend as much time as I need, so it's what the Holy Spirit is asking. And then I have I'm officiating a wedding this weekend. So they, with rehearsals and preparation and all that stuff, they can be a little time consuming, but it's all good. I mean, I wouldn't trade my life with anybody, because I get to do what I'm called to do. I believe I'm doing what I'm called to do, and love people, and I get to build stuff too. So I think it's pretty decent. And thank you for asking. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, things are great. I want to say from the standpoint of the church, I feel that we're in a really great place. I also I'm with you, Karl. I take time pretty regularly to reflect on where I'm at in life, and it's important that I'm doing good. That's just always, well, as an adult anyway, that's been a thing that's been important to me. Am I a good father, a good husband, a good member of the community? And I feel like a lot of us in the church, and maybe all of us are in really good places doing things that are benefiting each other and living for God. And I think that's a really cool place to be. And that's why we're able to come together, right? And it was fantastic coming out to see everybody in Fargo.
That was cool.
Now, I wouldn't recommend anybody else, if you're planning a road trip, leaving at 5:30 in the morning from Bismarck to go to Fargo when it's really foggy. Not the best, but when the sun came out, it was amazing. And getting to see everybody feeling so welcomed, and I from what I saw and felt here in Bismarck, it was the same when folks from Fargo came. Really appreciate everybody that partook in the exchange, and of course the cake and ice cream in Fargo, and the tailgating here in Bismarck. I did notice that I knew that I was going to hear the same message. I was pretty sure that you didn't give different messages in Fargo and Bismarck. There were a couple things that were different, and I wanted to it's funny because other people noticed it too when we talked after church. One of them was when you talked about the fence, and we were talking about dealing with issues that are in the church. We're not going to go to the secular court, right? If we can deal with this within the church, it's okay sometimes if you're feeling like it's not fair, and we can accept that. That's part of life. I think back a lot to the book Unoffendable. I've recommended it here. That's exactly what it's all about, and I think it really fit into the message. In Fargo, the fence that you talked about with the neighbor was 6 inches over, but in Bismarck it was only 3 inches over. So I'm not sure if you felt like maybe 6 was too much. Maybe that would cause issues, but it was a funny difference. And then also what do you call that? Spoiler alert. Fair warning for parents, if you're watching this with your kids, this would be a good time to duck out for about a minute and then come back. But in Fargo, you talked about the Santa Claus situation, and in Bismarck, I noticed that you jumped over it because of who was in the audience. So
I had a table of young kids, and I'm not sure where they were at, and you never do know, right, until you ask. And my wife gives me a lot of grief about that. That particular example. It's a non-truth, right? There is no Santa Claus. There was a Santa Claus. You could go into the whole history, but that's not what a kid wants to know when they ask you, is there a Santa Claus? And so I just think we make enough excuses. Everybody can make their own choice as to what they want to tell their kids or grandkids as far as Santa Claus goes. Um, but I just think we make enough excuses about relabeling sin and calling, sin a white lie or whatever. That was my example. A kid at
Sure.
9 or 10 years old realizes, wow, my parents were lying to me for 8 years. And it could happen. I'm not
Sure.
saying it does happen, but you are indeed lying to them. They could figure that out. It could come back to bite you in the butt. And that was just my example.
Well, and
It's I don't know if it's a good example or not, but it is one that pretty much everybody has done at some time in their life, is lied to somebody about Santa
right.
Claus.
And that's I appreciate extreme examples, and that was one. Because for
It
me,
is.
that was a slap. Like, okay, that was a wake up call more than a slap. It wasn't a,
Sure.
a
Yeah.
literal slap, but that wake up that, yeah, those little things, and the idea of the slippery slope, and that's become such a politicized uh, phrase. It's tough to use, but I get it when it comes to that. And on one hand, we talk about the forgiveness and the grace that God's given us, and then on the other, we are broken people. And if we had a third hand, then they're just trying to reconcile all of these things together. And it's
Yeah.
nobody says that being a Christian is easy, and it's times and messages like that that uh I didn't feel like there was anything out of whack in what I heard. And let me tell you, this was
Okay.
because I had a chance to really think about it on the motorcycle ride home, and then
Yeah, you got
again,
to hear it twice.
yeah,
So
and then having Cloverdale hot dogs and hamburgers, I got to think about it and talk it out with some folks more. Which again, I love that conversation that we get to have after the service when
mhm.
people come together and keep chatting about it. But I wrote it out a little bit. So trust in the Spirit was the title of the message, and
Yep.
that is the core. So for me, I heard that we live to honor God, we flee from sin, and and this is where I had to take it outside of myself, because I can convict myself pretty easily and get stuck in a tough cycle. But if any of us are living in sin and living out sin, right, then we're called to help
Yep.
each other out. We call each other out. We're called to help each other. And I think that's so what I took from that, and maybe this is a few degrees off of what the message was intended, but what I was feeling with that was we don't need to go to court because the fence is in the wrong place. If somebody is in a place that they feel like they need to go to court over that, let's step in and have a conversation about it as a church
Sure.
family. Like, where are you at? Why do you feel like it's, are you okay? Are you vindictive about something?
Yeah.
Is there an underlying sin? So that's
Yeah.
maybe, and again, like, I don't know if that was the intended message for sure, but that sure felt like what I needed to hear. How about that?
Right. And actually what you're describing is a combination of the message 2 weeks ago and
Mm,
then this last week. Is, yeah, we are called to hold each other accountable, and
right,
there's a big difference between the way we treat unsaved and the way we treat saved, right? We
right.
hold saved people accountable. I mean, if that's what the Bible says. That's what we talked about 2 weeks ago. And my wife brought up a really, really good, and I'm going to share it now because it's kind of it was an eye opener for me, and because we do the same thing. We talk about messages, and she sometimes says, a little long, Karl, and or you started talking a little fast, or so
Mhm.
which I ask her to do. I ask her
Sure.
to do that because I want to grow as a pastor. So the only way is to take criticism, right? And if all she's going to do is tell me how great I am or something, well, that's not helpful at all, right? So we talk about something. She said, she gave an example, because we're always so worried about what's fair and what's just, and getting my rights. And I
Mm,
think I had plenty of examples of all those. But she said, we get so wrapped up in something being fair, and we forget that. And sorry if I'm going to bring the party down, but she says, right now there's a little boy or a little girl who gets picked on and bullied at school, and when they come home they're abused and screamed at, and they have nowhere to go to be safe.
right.
So where's the fairness there? And I thought, holy cow, what a heart ripper. That's true. I mean, we get so worried about, I'll use my fence again. How far was it? 9 inches on my property, and that's just going to end the world. I mean, that's I can't sleep until this is. But we
Mm,
never ever start comparing ourselves when it's going to convict us. We just don't do that. And that was really, I mean, I was surprisingly, I was quiet for a few minutes. I went, man, that's an amazing, and it's a truth. It's
right,
not some, you know, some parable or some, I can't think of the word, some far off example. It
right.
does happen. It is
Mm.
happening right now in this world. That exact scenario plays out every single day. And where's the screaming for justice? Where and I just thought it was a great example.
That is,
And
and it so in human terms for me, I think about it in this way. So if someone is doing something that offends me, right? Let's use that word. It's something that,
sure,
oh man, how could they possibly be doing that? Well, that same little boy or girl you were talking about is now that grown up that has all of these issues and all this baggage that they're carrying with.
yeah,
Plus, they had a flat tire on the way to work and they're in a
yeah,
long-standing relationship issue, and all of this is happening at this exact moment. And that's why I got cut off. And
yeah,
it's none of my business why that
yeah,
happened. Right. And that's
yeah,
so taking all of those tapes
yeah.
out to the full end, the end of that story is an important part of it's important for me to keep my sanity. And one more thing I'd like to touch on, I really, and for those watching and Karl, I really appreciate the opportunity to keep talking these things out. I think it's
Oh,
beneficial
absolutely.
that we keep diving in. Uh, the idea that there's God and everybody else, and
Mhm.
then there's me. There's each individual person. Uh, One thing that I struggled with uh, before I was Christian and as a young Christian, and even still sometimes today, when I put myself at that level, I have to remember when I'm at my best, I remember this, that I'm not less than. I have to put myself there to serve others, and to serve
Yep,
others, which is
yep.
important to me. I also have to take care of myself. And
Hmm.
there are times that I can take on too many things. I'll say yes because I'm serving. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. Or I can't do this for myself because I have to do things for others. And then I'm worn out and I'm not able to help where I need to. So
Absolutely.
I didn't hear that in the message, and maybe it was because I was stuck in my own thoughts. But for those of us that suffer with anxiety and whatever other issues and labels we
Sure.
want to put on it, self-esteem issues, that's an important
Sure.
thing for me too. Like I can put myself down below everybody else, but I can do that in a way that's not healthy. So I just wanted to put that out there and see what your thoughts are on that angle of it as well.
Absolutely. So when I talk about God being on top, everybody else being in the middle, and then we're at the bottom,
Hmm.
that is the picture. That's my diagram of
Hmm.
service.
Yeah, yeah,
And I've heard, and I believe this, uh, that you can't truly feel love until you love yourself.
yeah.
You
Oof.
can't truly forgive until you forgive yourself. And somebody who's struggling with health issues, and what good are you helping someone move if you keep putting your back out?
Right, right.
All those things. It's a picture of service. Now, it's not to say, and I love that you said that. It's not to say that you're less than, because think about this. When we put ourselves, God, everybody else, and then we're taking on the role that Jesus took
Hmm.
when he became man, and we resemble Jesus. Now, that's a great example. And Jesus wasn't less than.
Right, right.
And so I hope that answered a little bit of what you were saying there, but it's the
Mhm.
diagram of service.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, 100%. And I think it's one of the things that I like about our church and the community that we have is that we can have these conversations about uh, the 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 Bible, the Word, the
mhm.
message, and our broken humanity, and how we can put all of this together.
Yeah,
Right? That's an
yeah.
important part of being a Christian in today's world. So that's kind of what I had. Anything? So
Cool.
was there anything in going through this last week with the message or with the get-togethers that we had? Anything that you feel wasn't covered that you still wanted to talk out? I that great example you had from Oz was a great
Yeah,
example of something else to talk about. But yeah.
great. No, I think this really, you thank me quite frequently for being able to do this. And I want to thank you too, because I get, like, when people write I'm guessing, I've never written poetry. I think I wrote a haiku in 7th grade, but when people write poetry or draw a picture or write a song or something like that, you can kind of get in your own head a little bit, and sometimes that keeps you from wanting to share it with anybody, because you don't want to know what people think. Well, I believe God has called me to share what the Holy Spirit shared with me. So in the last couple weeks, especially because we get into some of this hard text, and sometimes it's not that I'm leaving things out, it's that if I continue explaining to where how long do you guys want to sit there? It's kind of one of those things. And so, and actually this week I'm going to divide 7 into 2 separate messages, because there's so much in there. But we throughout the week, my wife and I talk, you and I talk. We have a group that meets at my house on Wednesdays, and it's when people are really honest. I think what's really important, like I truly believe you're being honest with me when you bring these questions. You're not trying to bust my chops.
Right.
That shows me areas where I might need to add in to make it a little more not palatable, but self-explanatory, or that might not even be right either.
Relatable, maybe.
Relatable. There you go. And so, I just really, I enjoy these times, and it's, I believe it helps me grow as a pastor. So I really appreciate it. And, for as much as a human, you love hearing good job, and way to go and stuff like that. It's a little bit different for a pastor when, think of, well, you don't really know what I'm talking about this week, but there's some stuff this week. If someone were to come up and say, "Wow, that was a great message," I think then I failed.
Right.
And a lot of times it just feels like that. Like, we're talking about forgiveness and sin and serving and resembling Jesus, and if someone can leave there and they're like, "Nailed it, man," it's like, you were reading me my life. I think I failed. So I'm always open to constructive and heartfelt criticism, because I think it's going to help me be a better pastor.
Right. One of the reasons that I am so appreciative is I feel like this is of all the time you as our pastor have in a given week, we get to spend this time together, and I feel like it's a privilege to me. So being able to give back, and I think for those that watch along, and an important thing for everyone, I think, is that we can have this conversation. So the more we can have these conversations, the more we can talk about it. The grow groups and the small groups that we have, the chance to get together for coffee and have all these conversations. I think that's what keeps our community growing. And let's talk about what's coming up. So 1 Corinthians 7. Now, I agree. I think there could be a series where we start at Genesis 1 and take a verse a week until we get through the entire Bible, and still want to break pieces down and spend many weeks on each individual component. So I'm not at all surprised that we get to the middle of Corinthians. It's like 16 chapters.
16 chapters, yep.
So we're getting close to the middle. So if it's we've had the appetizer, we know there's dessert coming up. We're getting down to the meat and potatoes now. Right. So it doesn't surprise me we're going to separate it out. And so we're still in other words, and we're hearing about Paul's happy, great message, telling everybody what a fantastic job they're doing in Corinth.
Yeah, he's a real cheerleader.
So what's he going to talk about? What are we going to talk about and hear about this week then?
Okay, well, we're going to talk about, and I really would encourage people to, I know I say that every week, but I would really encourage two distinct groups of people. I would encourage anyone that's married to read chapter 7, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Okay. And I'd also encourage anyone who is single to read 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
Right? But what about if they're now dating? That's still single.
I think in God's eyes, it's still single. Yep.
Still single. So, all right. So just making sure we're not excluding anyone. So essentially, the people whose name begins with the letter G, and people whose name does not begin with the letter G. We could also distinguish that way. Okay.
I think that's right. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So everyone reading First Corinthians chapter 7, and you said you're going to break it up into a couple different areas.
We are going to break it up into 2 sections. And the first section, I am titling, in other words, Till Death Do Us Part. So that should give you an idea whether it's going to be married or single. But both married and single people need to hear this, because what Paul does in kind of all of his books, all of his letters, he interweaves and he calls back, and he will resort back to something he said a chapter ago, and he'll give you a little bit of something he's going to talk about later. So we're going to work through all that stuff, because there's some things, and I've read a few translations this week to find out. And I'm not saying that some translations have some translations you need to almost have a translation for the translation, because some of the words that are used. And I'm using NIV this week, but I'm going to call back a little bit to New King James, just because I like the way it's worded, and I might even bring a little message in there. Because, but I encourage people to do that too. If you read something, especially now with what we have available to us on our computers, you can go to Bible Hub or Gateway or Red Letter, Blue Letter, I think is another one, and you can get almost unlimited translations. And I'm not saying read until you find something that you like. Read until it makes sense.
Yeah. So will we get a thee or a thou in the message?
No, New King James stays a little bit away from it. I can put one in for you.
All right,
I'll throw it in there for you.
The weekly challenge. We'll have a challenge for the message each week. I love it. I remember as a young born again Christian, just learning what the Bible meant, not just something to be read on Sunday, but that it meant something to me, and I was really starting to feel that. And a pastor friend introduced me to a concordance.
Oh yeah,
this was before the internet, so for me, I soaked it up. So I can look at this phrase and look at what it means in other translations. Also going all the way back to the original language, and that I get goosebumps thinking about the fact that we have that connection, because language is so important to me. So knowing that we have that direct connection is cool. Can't wait for the message. Till Death Do Us Part. And here's to getting to see everybody this weekend. I don't think I'm going to ride motorcycle to Fargo every week, but maybe we'll plan another time. But I wanted to say thanks before we wrap up today. Was that it on the message, on the preview? I'm sorry, I kind of.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
There's I sometimes say this, and it's because I'm human. I don't want to. I mean, obviously, we all want people to like us, and there's some things that Paul talks about that are, I would say, less than pleasant. And there's some things that I also believe that we've been maybe unconsciously or we'll just say that, misconstruing or
maybe
interpreting a little differently.
And I think along a little bit. Yeah.
And I think this is really going to help. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I really honestly do. When we start to see how God truly sees marriage and singleness and everything in between, I think it's very, very helpful. There are things in between. You're smiling, but there are things in between marriage and singleness that we struggle with.
There's things we struggle with all along the way. So between those two, I can't imagine we wouldn't. So good. I just wanted to say in Bismarck, we've gone through some physical changes in our church building too, and everybody that's put time in, from the folks that did the physical moving to the sound and computer and the cleaning and organizing and making it look nice and rearranging and last minute changes. My goodness, you talk about things happening behind the scenes, and I don't want to name a name or a list of names because I'll forget somebody. So to everybody that's been part of it, the folks that even helped, it was awesome. You brought a bunch of people. You made them get up at like 4 something in the morning on Saturday. You guys drove out here, and everybody piled into the church and started working, moving tables, moving chairs. And then after that was done, Karl showed up and we played some music. And it was, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That is what happened, but that wasn't the intent.
It is, yep.
But really, heartfelt thanks. It makes me feel so good to know that we have a group of people, a whole community, a whole family that make this happen each and every week. And when these major things happen, it just works out. So praise God. We're keep doing this thing, and we're on a fantastic cycle right now. So
We are. I agree.
yeah, thanks again, Karl, and everybody that's part of this. Keep sharing it. Keep sending the link out. We'll keep talking about these things, and we'll see you at church or next time right here. God bless.